Welcome back to Great Day Houston. After noticing gaps in service during her own encounter with domestic abuse, Kathy Phipps created Back to Eden. It's a program that empowers and educates survivors of domestic and sexual violence. She is joined by Marsha Green, who's a board member, and she's done counseling and therapy and the whole bit. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
All right, the whole thing of domestic violence, I think we have taken it out more than ever before. It still needs to be more out there so people are aware.
Absolutely.
But it can happen to anyone.
Yes, absolutely.
What was your situation?
So I was married for 10 years, and it was typically, unhealthy relationship where there was just one-sidedness in as far as the decision making in the relationship, and then eventually it progressed into what was abuse. Just I couldn't deny it anymore. And so once I decided to leave the relationship and the divorce was final, and as I was going through that process, I was able to go to Houston Area Women's Center and receive services. And once the divorce was finalized, I saw that there were some gaps in services.
Yeah, because there's some immediate concerns, obviously your safety, and then of course, getting divorced, legal services and stuff like that.
Right.
But when you say gaps, what kind of gaps are you talking about?
So once the person's out of the crisis and they're ready to move on with their life, what do they do? So primarily all the services and the funding is for immediate crisis situation, to get you out of that situation, shelter, funding. And so what does that person do? I'm ready to move on with my life. I'm more than a survivor. So how do I thrive in my life?
Yeah.
And so that's why I developed Back to Eden.
And that's where, Marsha, when you come in terms of your whole background with drug and alcohol counseling and the whole bit, because the thing to do is to make sure that person doesn't go back. There's something that has a hold on us and how we pick certain people. And I was in an abusive relationship early on in college, and I had to really go back and figure out how did I end up there and what made me stay so long, right? But you want to also interrupt that cycle.
Absolutely, because it's definitely, I call it family violence. The whole family's affected. The children in the relationship are affected, and they actually are trying to help the mother, who's usually the victim, survive. And so they all need support. The whole entire family.
All right, so take us through with Back to Eden, and why did you decide to name it that?
To go back to the beginning, so to empower that person, don't think about the abuse and what you've gone through. Let's go back to who you were originally before you experienced all of this abuse.
Yeah. Sometimes who you were originally, though, is what got you in trouble, right? And so you have to really understand what you were originally.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
I had some insecurities. I had no self-esteem.
Right.
You dealt with a situation of child molestation.
Yes.
And so we put ourselves out there as, please love me, am I lovable, right?
Right, absolutely. So getting that validation, right? So going back to the beginning of who you were supposed to be and knowing what your wounds are and healing from that and moving on.
Yeah.
So that's what Back to Eden, it's about that mentoring and getting someone to speak to that person that you are on the inside to empower you.
And one of the things that's very empowering is to have somebody who's actually walked that path to look at you and say, I understand.
Yes.
So with the empathy and sympathy is what's important.
Yes.
I talked about that cycle thing, and oftentimes we've seen where if kids grew up in a household with domestic violence, that oftentimes the female will repeat that as being a victim of domestic violence, and then the male will repeat that as being the one inflicting that. It can happen both ways. But how important and how therapeutic is that for you to be able to help?
Very. It's my way of giving back. It's my process of healing. It's my process of validating, but also creating that platform knowing that this is just a chapter in your life and you're able to move on if you have that right support.
Yeah, and you go through the program, and then when you kind of complete the program or graduate from the program, you earn a $500 seed grant?
Yes, that's correct. So the program is 9 months long, and it is truly a fellow program where they're actually going to be to learn leadership and to be a change agent within their community. So they're going to learn cultural diversity, social engagement, community activism, and then once that 9 months is over, they're able to use that $500 to start their own project or even use it to continue their education.
Yeah. Importance of strength in numbers is what?
Well, I think the strength in numbers is that we're enabling the person to do whatever they need to do
Yeah.
to heal.
And realize they're not alone.
And that they're not alone. Yeah, absolutely not alone.
Because this is one of those things that, like I said, we kept quiet for so long, but when people realize, wait a minute, this is not her problem or his problem, this is a social problem.
Right.
Because we know that can spin out of control. We look at drug abuse. Drug abuse is a symptom of something else
Yes.
people are dealing with. And so as soon as we clear up all these other things or give people an avenue, is when we all really heal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, 95% of the women I worked with in treatment were sexually abused as children.
Yeah, yeah.
And they never really dealt with that problem.
Right.
And so there was family violence and
Family of origin, the whole bit.
The whole bit,
All right.
yeah.
Well, thank you for what you're doing to interrupt that cycle. Back to Eden is hosting a fellow program for survivors. It takes place this Sunday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. at Coffee and Cake Café, located at 4407 West Fuqua Street. For more information, visit backtooedenfellowprogram.com.